Continue to invest what you're investing, but please don't lose sight of the fact that it costs you a boatload of money to just make the minimum payments to get your equity out of the thing. Because if it costs me $12,811 to get $9,500 in equity, can I justify that? If I have $9,500 laying around in an account making 1/10 of 1%, when I could apply it to this mortgage and save myself $11,000 in interest I don't have to pay.
We may have a mild difference on approach.
Okay.
And that's totally fine. I just figured I would follow that track with you.
Well, listen.
And see where you went.
Listen, that is always a very good question. So what we want to do is make sure that we don't do an either or. So either we're going to be satisfied with the amount of money that we have going towards investment. I'm satisfied with the money I have going towards investment, and I don't want to touch a dime of that money, but I have some other monies that aren't being invested. Why can't I use some of those monies to kill a little bit of interest that I don't have to pay the bank? Because any amount of interest that I save and I keep track of it, I can invest that too. So if I keep this thing for 30 years, my $450,000 I'm paying for this house, paying for this property, is actually a $672,000 purchase. What if I can purchase this property for 75% off by using dormant funds while I'm still investing the amount of money that I'm perfectly satisfied with?
By the way, I completely agree with you in the current rate market. Like absolutely 1,000,000%.
Yeah.
I think the position, where I'm coming from is for anybody who managed to get a rate before the colossal rate hikes took place.
Yeah.
I think there's some consideration due to whether or not it's cheaper to actually make the minimum payments in that context. I think kind of looking at your example, if I've got a reserve fund of $10,000, and I'm going to pay $5,562 to the mortgage today, go straight to principal, take 7 months off the back end of the mortgage, right? And I guess in the current lending market, I mean, maybe investing the money right this second, at this exact moment, you know, unless you really have a good pulse on what the market is doing, and that's pretty unlikely.
Yeah.
You know, I'm taking a huge gamble by taking a net short position because who knows? Maybe the government comes in and decides, screw it, the inflation is totally fine. Let's goose the market with more dollars, and then all of a sudden the market crash stops, right? At the cost of the value of the current dollar. But you know, that being said, if we're to believe that the market is going to have like a downward trajectory for a little bit, maybe investing that money right at the second is not the greatest idea. But at the same time, I think there's something to be said about, well, if you're going to put 55, 60, if you've got a cheap mortgage, like a dirt cheap mortgage where the interest rate is less than inflation, right? And you take the money, you've got 55.62 you want to put towards prepaying the mortgage, or you can invest it somewhere else. I think when you're looking at the potential returns on that investment, even if it's pulling a pretty relatively garbage 4 or 5%, I think there's something to be said about actually investing those dollars because the debt that you have already is so cheap, and because it's so difficult to get more of that cheap debt going forward. Especially, actually, it's impossible now because the rates are what, 5.5?
Well, yeah. Let's talk about that for just a second. And number one, here's what we're talking about. When we conflate or equate the interest on my mortgage at 2.875 with compound interest that I could make, that could be a mistake. So what we want to do is figure out what amortized interest is actually doing to this loan. So let me ask you this. If I were to borrow $9,000, okay, $9,000 for 1 year, I don't care what they tell me the interest rate is, but the interest cost to pay back the $9,000 is $12,811.76. Can anybody tell me that that is 2.875%?
Nope.
Nope. I'm borrowing $9,500, paying it back in 1 year. I got to pay the bank 12 grand. So if your bank called you up today and says, I got a deal for you, I'm going to lend you $10,000 for 13 months. You pay it back, and then you pay me back $13,866 in interest. You would never sign that loan.
True, but did we just take a 1 year slice off of a 30-year mortgage?
My point is, when we take a look at even the 1 year slice, it takes a certain amount of interest to move the loan from point A to point B. If I'm going to move the loan from point A to point B, let's say line 1 to line 12, moving it from point A to point B, I can either choose to pay $12,811 in interest to do it, or I can choose to pay something less than $12,800 in interest to do that one thing. Now, the deeper you get into the loan, the amount of interest you can save is less and less and less. There's a certain point, you're exactly right. Then we need to stop putting money towards debt reduction and then take that money and put it towards wealth creation. But in the beginning of this loan, it's not 2.875. If I borrow $9,000 and I pay back $9,000 and $9,000 in interest on top of that, that's 100% loan all day. So let's take a look at this. Now I'm going to do one more thing here because we mentioned the interest rates going to around 5%. Let me show you something since you're looking at this. I'm going to change the interest rate to 5% on this.
By the way, my argument tilts entirely in your favor if you change it to 5%. I would 100 billion%.
Oh, no. Listen, if I had a choice between the 2.875 and the 5% loan and I could afford the payment, guess which loan I would take? I'd take the 5% loan all day. And here's why. All right. So let's take a look at, remember, I mentioned about $9,500 prepaid to the 2.875 loan. Okay. About $9,500 takes off about 12 months if I were to prepay that. Now, again, please don't think that I'm saying I should take money that I could invest and pay off the mortgage. I would never do that. Never. I want to make sure that I'm investing the right amount of money and that I'm also saving interest with some monies that are kind of laying dormant that I could do something else with. I'm saying let's do both, not either or. But the $9,500 with the same amount of principal takes off 17 months off this loan. It's actually easier to pay the loan off faster and cheaper at 5% than it is at 2.875. That's what amortization does to a loan. It just makes it topsy-turvy. And you say, well, Don, look at the interest payments on this thing. And my retort to that would be interest payments I skip don't matter. They just don't. If I'm looking to save money and interest and I'm stuck with this 5% rate, I'm not going to let that 5% rate deter me from making an investment because I can make great headway at a higher percent interest loan if I have a little bit of money on the side to prepay. So I love the higher interest loans today. And I love the fact that, they're talking about for residential clients, they're talking about 40-year loans. I can't wait to get a 40-year loan and a 5% interest rate. I will kill that thing by using this method. Brian, I want to thank you for coming to the stage. Do you have any other questions for us? This has been a healthy debate, man. I love it.
It's a good conversation. I appreciate you.
But Don has some valuable information that can contribute to the quality of a person's life. And it only costs you a few dollars. It's his book. Why not get that?
I'm going to go through the P.I.L.L method myself with some of my investment properties. So I'm going to link up with Don, and then I'm going to sit down with him, show him my investment portfolio, and see how I can eliminate interest.